Alright, here we go. Chapter 21, Climate and Climate Change. There are three sections in this chapter. 21.1, What is Climate? 21.2, Climate Zones, and 21.3, Climate Change. Now 21.1, What is Climate? We have two vocabulary terms, climate and climate controls. Our objectives are define climate, what is climate, and then describe the factors that influence climate. Some of our key ideas are an area's climate is its long-term pattern of weather, which varies depending on several factors. Big question here is why does climate differ in various places? Now the climate of a region is its long-term weather. Two main characteristics of climate are temperature and precipitation, which can be described by averages and ranges. Some of these ranges can last anywhere between a few years to decades to centuries to thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, even to millions of years, depending on how much data can be collected. Now there are many other factors act together to determine Earth's climate. Here are our climate control factors: latitude, elevation, distance from large bodies of water, ocean currents, topography, prevailing winds, vegetation. These are our climate controls. Now some climate controls have a greater effect than others at different locations. For example, Beijing, China, and Valdivia, Chile have the same average temperature but different climates. So if you look at it, they are the same latitude. Issue here is that Beijing has a very, very cold winter and a very dry, hot summer, whereas Valdivia, Chile is on the coast. It's not on the leeward side of a mountain. It's on the coast. So when you look at Beijing, Beijing has those really severe winters, really severe summers. But then Valdivia, Chile has, even though it's the same latitude, just different hemisphere, it has a much more moderate tropical climate. So let's check this chart out. This is a summary of all the climate controls. If you look at latitude, you see the temperatures are generally colder towards the poles. Precipitation, low pressure. We talked about the ITCZ in the previous chapter, and the mid-latitude lows. They have precipitation. The poles and horse latitudes usually have a little precipitation. So latitude, depending on where you're at relative to the equator and the poles, can dictate your temperature and precipitation. Elevation. Obviously, as you go higher in the troposphere, the temperature decreases. So temperatures are generally colder in higher elevations. Precipitation. Air at higher elevations generally contains less moisture, so lower precipitation. Nearby water. The temperature range of large bodies of water is very small. So any coastal areas often have mild climates. Mild meaning it doesn't change. There's not an extreme change between its winter and its summer. It's pretty close to being the same year-round. Now, large bodies of water add water vapor to the air by evaporation, so precipitation is more likely downwind of large bodies of water. Ocean currents. Warm ocean currents warm nearby coasts. Cold ocean currents include upwelling currents, cool nearby coasts. Depending on what side of the ocean, of the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean you're on, and what those large currents are doing, that can determine what type of weather or climate that region might have. Now some ocean currents can cause fog. Again, fog can lead to precipitation, but there relatively isn't a whole lot of precipitation factoring into ocean currents. Now topography, we talked about this before. Leeward side versus windward side. Leeward side is typically warmer, windward side is typically cooler. So mountains can act as barriers to air masses. Just like in Beijing, China, compared to Valdivia, Chile. It's a leeward side of a mountain, so you're going to have a lot different climate than if there was no, or if you're on the windward side of a mountain. Now precipitation, windward side, much more precipitation because it doesn't allow that moisture to rise up on the other side or the leeward side of the mountain. It all pours down on the windward side. Prevailing winds. Prevailing winds may determine whether air masses arrive from a hot region or from a cool region. See, when we're looking at the different types of air masses and where they originate, those prevailing winds will push those air masses in certain directions. So that can control the climate of a region. Prevailing winds may determine whether air masses arrive from a wet or maritime or from a dry or continental area Obviously, maritime air masses, prevailing winds can push those air masses, producing precipitation, and the opposite for the continental air masses. Vegetation. Vegetation affects how much insulation Earth's surface absorbs and how quickly the surface heats up or cools. So you might have an area of a lot of vegetation. That vegetation could absorb more of the insulation, so the surface is a little cooler, so the climate would change. Precipitation. Vegetation releases water vapor into the air through transpiration, so therefore areas of high vegetation, tropical regions, jungles, forests, places like that typically have a little bit more precipitation. That's it for 21.1. Next up, 21.2.